that one of the superpowers of Gingers is that we get to wear anything that we want. So shame on you. Let's start out with that. So as was discussed in the opening session here, this the accessibility for PhoneGap applications has become hugely important, especially as developers are getting into government spaces, education spaces, places where accessibility is a really important concern for people. So I have some demos, and I usually kind of sort of ask the audience like what what their experience is with running VoiceOver or TalkBack on their devices, and I have a pretty good idea of sort of the makeup of these audiences now. So I'm just going to sort of show you, and I'll do a little demo using TalkBack on Android. And then I will do a demo of just basic VoiceOver interaction, because the model, the way that things work is actually really important. But first, here's the why you should care slide. If you make money building apps for government contractors, especially in the United States, because the rules for them apply just as if they were working for the government. The same is true across the EU. UK has their Disability Discrimination Act. Australia, China, Japan, Korea, all of them have these standards in place, and they are getting more and more serious about enforcing them. So and then larger corporations will have their own policies that enforce accessibility, and then even more within education, especially higher education. So this is now just becoming not kind of a nice to have, but something that is actually going to be written into your contract. So paying attention to accessibility is going to be really important to you. It's also a mark of professionalism, because we don't conceptualize why accessibility is important until it impacts us. People usually will discuss, will discover, when a loved one has, breaks an arm, or has an accident, loses their vision. That's usually when we sort of have this empathy and start to understand that this is about sort of equal participation in society. And as we are starting to build these applications for, e-voting, paying your taxes, the forms for doing that online, accessing your bank accounts, your retirement funds, your social services. All of these things are, buying groceries. All of these things are now a common part of what we're doing in real life, and this extends to even your Snapchats and your and games. All of these things are able to be made accessible, as long as we understand what needs to go into it. So I'm going to start out, and any of you who have used TalkBack know that this is kind of a live without a net experience. So
5:36 a.m.
I'm just going to open this up. Now this is the interface. I can't actually get Google Cast to work on my screen here.
Screen
so
off, ringer silent.
I'm going to wing it. But this is the interface that we're looking at here.
5:30. Screen off, ringer silent. 5. 3DEF 0 plus 8 TUV 0 plus enter. Device unlocked. PhoneGap mobile accessibility. Overview. CSUN 2014.
Okay, now we're in this application, and we built this for an accessibility conference last year. This is all HTML. This is an app that was built by the PhoneGap team, and we just did some modifications to make it more directly accessible. Now, what you're seeing here is actually pure HTML. We made this as semantically correct as possible. So, instead of this being a button or a slider, this is actually marked up as, I believe this is a select box, but we could do it as a list or whatever. Hamburger menu is a menu with list items underneath it, so we can navigate that way. And then these are all lists with the name of the or the time of the session. This is as a link with a header, so we can click down into it. We have the little star icon, which is actually a checkbox. So we're doing these things with CSS. Now what we get out of that is the semantics for how we're going to lay things out. But We can navigate using our fingers to highlight these items.
Assistive technology for students with visual impairments, a research agenda. Stacy Kelly and Derek Smith. Not checked, starred, checkbox.
We can double tap anywhere on the screen.
Checked.
And we can check that box. So we can highlight these things. And the way that this works for the user is that it makes it a lot easier for them to understand, because this actually feels like a web page. They sort of understand how to navigate through this, and they have some facilities for working within that framework. So, but we can move in between.
8 a.m. lunar tabs, an intelligent screen reader friendly guitar tab reader. 8 a.m. to 8:50 a.m.
So we have so we're able to move from item to item. And this has some smooth scrolling, so like a page-by-page scrolling function in it. And we are actually able to tell the user what page they're on, because we can communicate that information as well. So we've made this application that sort of still feels right. It has some not very webby kinds of interaction, so it feels more like a mobile native application. But it still has that structure that the users need to be able to interact. I'm going to unplug this before it makes more noise. The way that we've done this is that we're using the web views that the operating systems give us. And we're fortunate in that every operating system vendor has already done more work on the web view from an accessibility standpoint than they do for any other component, because it is the most important component as far as user interfaces go. So we get to use all of that benefit for building PhoneGap applications that take advantage of more accessible functionality. So we get the basic HTML accessibility. So if your elements have semantics, and this is really important, your div-itis problems where you're just sort of throwing a div up on the screen and laying it out the way that you want, that means that there's going to be no semantic information. The user's not going to know if this is supposed to be a heading or if it's supposed to be a list or whatever. You can still style all these things any way that you want to. You have a lot of flexibility, especially through CSS, to be able to express that information. But you need to know how to structurally express that information to be accessible. We also have some support for the way ARIA specification, which is an accessible rich internet applications specification. It's part of HTML5, something that I would recommend going in and looking at, and trying to understand and integrate into your applications. Really does help with that semantic area, because if you're building more complex components in HTML, you can actually just sort of say, this is actually a checkbox. I know it's just a couple of images that we're switching around, but now I want you to say that this is a checkbox when the user accesses that content. We support the touch navigation, so the user's going to be able to interact with this the same way that they would any other. They'd be able to find anything that's on the screen. And I'll do a quick demo on my iPad here for that. And screen reader, magnifier support for high contrast, all of those things come as part of the bundle since we're using the web view. And so if you're doing web accessibility, if you're doing it the way that you would do for a given website, you'll still have that support in PhoneGap. With one exception, which is why we have an additional component specific to mobile accessibility. So the way that we made that work is, our PhoneGap apps are web apps. We have the same rules for accessibility. We're using everything that's available to us across all the platforms for web accessibility. So if you're doing a normal application, you understand about web accessibility, you're going to be able to take advantage of that in the PhoneGap applications that you build. So one big difference that we have between the mobile world and the web world is kind of philosophical. On the web, you cannot ask the browser, is this user running a screen reader? Is this user running screen magnification? Is high contrast on, et cetera? And that's basically because of privacy concerns. Like when in the bad old days of software development, when when apps had the ability to query for that information, it was usually to exclude users from certain parts of the experience. We don't want to do that. We want to integrate users into the experience. And so mobile, so the web platform just excluded all of that for security or for privacy concerns. Now that we have the mobile world, and this device that I'm holding in my hand is my agent. It's my way of accessing this information. We have the power to do better using this. So we have to understand that responsibility, though, that when we are finding out that information about the user, we kind of can't use it to our advantage to exclude them. We're trying to make sure that we're enabling them to do better things. So the tool that we have for that is called PhoneGap Mobile Accessibility. So we built this plugin and bridged the gap between what the mobile operating systems will tell you about whether a screen reader is running, et cetera, and then allow you to respond in your application to make your interface more accessible than you would normally be able to do. So we have information about the assistive technology status, what's running, what isn't, how large a user's fonts are, and so forth, and access to the text-to-speech engine, so we can actually directly speak we can actually send notifications that will be read out in real time to the user. And then a handful of generic functions. So instead of saying like is VoiceOver running, we can ask iOS if VoiceOver is running, or we can ask is a screen reader running. So we can support multiple platforms at the same time for this. And the support that we have right now is we have support on iOS and Android, which would include Fire OS, and we've recently pushed a new release that has Windows Phone 8.1 support, which is the first release that actually has their narrator built in. When we get into Windows 10, we'll have that support across all of the platforms, and that will include the narrator, which is going to be more or less functional on phones, tablets, and desktop devices. So your responsibility as a developer is going to be just to take care of the reading order. That's one of the real key points here. And I'll actually open this up. I'm going to show you how this works on iOS, because the way that you're going to be interacting with these applications is really different than you experience it visually. Users are going to be navigating through at more or less the reading order or the source order in your HTML. So if you're just sort of pushing things around the screen in the DOM in some kind of strange order, that's really the order that the user is going to access it as well. So I'm just going to go open up Reflector and hope that it will come up. Mirroring. There we go. Okay. So I encourage you to take a look at this on your own devices, just so that you can follow along or just give it a try. But one of the things that we can do is in the settings under accessibility, we can have a triple tap home selection that will bring up a menu that will give us the ability to invert colors. We can set the zoom level, so we can increase or we can magnify the screen. But what we're going to do is going to open up VoiceOver here. And this is going to completely change the mode of interaction for the user. So now when we tap on the screen, we're not actually going to be activating anything that we touch on. We're just going to be changing the focus. And apparently I've lost...
FaceTime, calendar, 50%.
Okay, well, now you can't see the screen either. So But I'm just going to navigate through the icons here, and what I'm doing is there's a focus rectangle around each of the icons as we're moving through it.
Camera. Contacts. Clock. 2 maps. Double tap to open.
So it's giving me an indicator to like what I can do with it. I can double tap anywhere on the screen to access this. I can also move my finger around the screen.
Extras folder. iTunes Store. Photo booth. Clock. Calendar. FaceTime. Double tap to open.
And it will just give me that all of that information. I can do multiple finger swipes to move from page to page.
Numbers.
So.
Page 3 of 4. PhoneGap.
So
double tap to open.
But the important thing is, if you are depending on dragging gestures alone to be able to move items around, for example, and you don't have any real facility to let users sort of select something and then move it around, that's another way that you can leave users behind. So understanding the way that these users are going to be interacting with this in a real linear fashion is going to have a lot of impact on the overall accessibility of the application. So I highly recommend going in, doing things like a 2-finger scroll up in VoiceOver will allow you to read the whole content of a page. So I'll do that here.
PhoneGap. Tutorials. Apple Store. Find My Friends. Beats Music. Find My iPhone. LastPass. Jupyter. Concur.
So I can 2-finger tap to stop that. And then the really important part is the triple tap
Video.
home.
Selected. VoiceOver.
To
VoiceOver
turn it
off.
That's one of the important tricks. So I do recommend just getting acquainted with how the users are going to interact with your app for this in this mode. Very different and something that if we're principally oriented to looking at our apps visually, it takes a while to get used to that difference. So these are the accessibility APIs that we have available. So everything from what is closed captioning enabled. So at the operating system level, somebody can select if closed captions or subtitles are turned on in videos. You can respond to that by enabling captions or displaying your own captions in videos that you're playing. Is a screen reader running? In Android, you have a touch exploration mode in Android 4 and below. That's kind of gone away in 5, but you can test for that. Guided access is a feature in iOS that sort of constrains how much of the screen is available to be touched and interacted with. We can test that we can trap the event of an accessibility state being turned on or off, or the captioning being turned on, touch exploration being turned on or off. We can find out if mono audio is enabled, so if somebody is only able to hear through one ear, both signals go into one headphone. Colors are inverted in iOS. We can listen for all of these state changes, including some in the next slide here. We have a speak event, a stop event. We can post notifications, as I said before, so we can notify users immediately of certain events. We can announce a specific phrase, and we can set and get the level of zoom as a proportion of 100%. So we can respond to that in our applications as well. And we can use the preferred text zoom in iOS 7 and up and in Android. So a lot of different functionality that's available to us. These are a handful of status changes, whether the screen reader is on, captioning, guided access, inverted colors, mono audio, and touch exploration. So doing this, we have this huge advantage from an accessibility standpoint because we're not having to do custom work in native code in every operating system. This is really the only platform that I'm aware of at this point that can do good accessibility work across multiple operating systems and with a common code base, which is extremely powerful just given how many people are developing PhoneGap applications and how many people are consuming them. So these are easier to develop and modify. we're using this web technology that's available to us, which itself is getting more accessible. Your jQuery mobiles have accessibility support. Angular's working on that. We can keep going with all of those. So we have a lot of advantages to developing this way, and I think it's a really good thing for accessibility overall that we can do that. So we can also use PhoneGap build for this. The PhoneGap mobile accessibility module is blessed by the PhoneGap build gods. So if you want to go and play with it, we don't have to do anything in the CLI to give this a try. So. Anyway, the GitHub repo is here, so PhoneGap mobile accessibility on GitHub. I'll just leave these links up so that you can copy them down. But I'll be here for the rest of the day if you have any questions. And thank you for your time.
Excellent. We have 1 minute left. Yeah, why not? Let's do a few questions. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
And we can set up for the next talk while we're doing this. So that's good to see that we're getting somewhere with this, because it was a bit of a closed environments, what are we doing with it? It's ironic to see that in closed environments we can check for the things, whereas on the web we never could legally.
Yeah. It wasn't really legal. It was more of a moral consideration that we wanted to make. We wanted to build a web where everybody was able to participate, equally. And then I think div came along and started to be used, and then all of that sort of went by the wayside. So now we're getting to the point where we have the tools that we need to really build something that everybody can use. It's just a matter of sort of understanding that capability.
Yeah. I was really excited about when the mobile revolution or evolution came out, and it felt to me like we have a chance to declutter our interfaces and make them better, because we're having smaller screens, or like big screens but big buttons make sense because our fingers are fat. And then that went out of the window really quickly again. When I looked at the LinkedIn app, for example, right now, or something like that, we just like to put more features in. Do you think there's a position that we will go back into that?
I think we're already there. I mean, actually I wrote a book about 8 years ago about the similarities between designing for people with disabilities and designing for your phones. Like that you have a limited amount of space to read, you have a limited attention span usually, you have difficulty reading, especially in sunlight. All of these things are common to somebody who has low vision or poor hearing and somebody who's just using their iPhone. So I think there's room for everything to sort of come together that way. That we're just starting to understand that you don't just throw as much stuff into the interface as you can. You just look for what people can use at that particular moment.
Well, yeah, hopefully. I mean, as a developer, I always think our framework must be faster because we need more stuff on screen, and like everybody needs 12 scrollers in each other and five carousels in between the others.
Yep.
One thing that is, of course, the big thing that everybody's very excited about is voice recognition on mobile devices. In the accessibility world, we had it for a long time. Mm-hmm. I don't get it, because I can't see people in like a 500 people office all talking to their computers.
Yeah.
And I always love the demo when it's like, who's the president of the United States? And I think the phone should answer, if you don't know that, how did you buy a phone? Because these predefined answers, and real voice recognition is much harder. What's your stance on that? Do you think gestures would be another next thing as well?
Well, if you look at what Google does with Google Now and the OK Google, you can type just as easily as you could speak into it, and it does the same kind of thing. So you can type in wake me at 6 a.m. and it will it'll do that. But that multimodal, it's going to be up to the user whether or not they want to participate in that in that interface. So. Yeah, I get the idea of like that being all cluttered and that lots of extra noise in when Cortana comes out in Windows 10, things like that. But it's really going to be beneficial for those quick hits. Like the things that you use Siri for are usually just sort of quick questions. You're not having a long conversation with it.
Depends how lonely you are.
Yeah, well. That's another problem. That's not one that we can really solve like one app at a time. But I think it's good that you have that as another tool, as long as you don't rely on it as the only thing that's available to you.
I like the Project Oxford that does now APIs into Cortana, APIs into facial recognition, gesture recognition, and voice recognition. I don't know how open that will be, but it's going to be, I like the idea of that. What about wearables? Do you think there's an accessibility benefit to them, or is it just, I mean, I'm not excited about them anymore. I have like 3 watches at home I'm not using.
Yeah, well, I think the, you know, the Apple Watch, he said while he's wearing an Android Wear watch, is just another way for people to consume new information, like get to especially I think the thing that's going to change a lot of people's minds about it is like the maps navigation, that you're just kind of walking down the street and then your phone vibrates and tells you turn left or turn right, which seems like a trivial thing until you actually use that and you go like, wow, this is really cool. Like I have like an extra brain in the cloud that's like, you know, telling me where to go.
5 minutes after you were supposed to turn because the GPS is delayed.
Yeah, well, it's not all perfect, but you know that. So you know, I think we will expand into the wearables. It's going to work a little bit better as time goes on.
I find it empowering to see that disabilities make better technology over time because it's a hardcore usability test. If you, I mean, talk to him later, talk to me as well about it. If you do any of these testing, don't make the mistake of using a screen reader and looking at the screen at the same time.
Right.
You should test it the way it's intended.
Triple tap with 3 fingers on the screen, it will turn the whole screen off, and then you get the whole experience on iOS.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.